luck. So yeah, here we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We are so glad that you could be here today because it required even extra effort being the day after daylight savings. And I'm your host, Irene Chancelong, grant specialist at Maddie's Fund. We are on week 2 of our Open Arms Challenge related community conversations. The challenge, which promotes welcoming and inclusive practices, represents a collaboration of over 20 national partners and over 600 challenge participants. So way to go. If your organization is not part of the challenge, you're still more than welcome on these Monday calls and have a chance to win the monthly grant giveaway by watching live or on demand and entering to win through the link that Kelly, you just dropped in the chat. Thank you so much. So before I introduce my super amazing co-host and headliner, I did want to start with a question of the day. And I will share that the inspiration of my question of the day was over the weekend, I vacuumed my car and it feels brand new. It's basically been a dog mobile for each of my dogs for umpteenth years. I know what you're all thinking. I should really clean my car on a regular basis, and I would tend to agree because then I could feel like a winner all the time. But basically, we want to celebrate both the milestones and the smaller wins of our personal and professional lives. And so often we find it's not just about the destination, but the journey. And so please share your win with us today. I am excited to be co-hosting with Charlotte Otero. Please introduce yourself and share your recent win with us.
Thanks, Irene. Hey, everyone. My name's Charlotte Otero. I'm the community strategist at Maddie's Fund, so I work on all things Maddie's Pet Forum. So I definitely wanted to share kind of a recent accomplishment for me. I was invited to be the keynote speaker at my alma mater for their first ever Women in Business Summit. It was a couple weeks ago, and so I got to go back to my college town of University of Idaho in Moscow. And it was really empowering just to feel so supported by this community that I haven't been back to in over 10 years. I was super nervous about doing an in-person presentation because I love the comfort of my computer, but it went pretty well. So I'm really excited to hear what some of your other wins are. If you want to drop them in the chat, or I'll read some aloud. I see Bunny's got their first written grant application. Congratulations. Jordan recently had twins. Congrats. Sold a house. Finishing graduate school. Incredible. Won a $400,000 grant. Congratulations, Katie. That's incredible.
Okay, our colleague Sharon shared that she organized her craft closet, and so I can very much appreciate that. She's a fellow crafter. Yeah, congratulations to all of you. Everybody's a winner. So I'm loving hearing all your recent wins. And by the way, Charlotte, your presentation was just spectacular. I can't even put into words like how motivational it was and how inspirational. I hope we can share it one of these days on community conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we may find a way to get it into here or do something for Maddie's Fund. So yeah, feel free, keep sharing your wins in the chat. We want to open the floor for some national updates, but our first national update will go to you, Dr. Delaney, to share. You're still muted.
I swear I clicked it. Maybe I double clicked because I was excited. So I am Dr. Cindy Delaney. I'm the Director of Online Learning for Maddie's Million Pet Challenge, and I am at the Koret Shelter Medicine Program. My big win this weekend was proofing weave poles with my Border Collie for agility competition stuff. So we proofed our weave poles really well. And also I worked on tomorrow's event, which is the Spring 2023 Shelter Summit. And so if you haven't been in the meeting the last couple of weeks, you haven't seen our adorable dancing cat. So we're going to show him one more time. And here is the adorable dancing cat to tell you about our.
I know we've got a long way to go. I know we've got a long road home. I know we've got a long way to go. Let's do this. Are you ready for a comeback? Are you ready to fly? Are you ready for the moment? Get ready to ride. Calling all the fighters, calling on survivors. Are you up all nighters? We can take it higher. Let's do this. Let's do this.
All right, in full disclosure, even though I have watched that video and heard that music hundreds of times while I was making that video, I still love that cat. I still love that music. I made myself a little pump up jam mix from that band for when I'm getting ready to compete in agility. So I'm just saying, if you need some pump up music, Outskirts with No I is an awesome band for that. So the summit is tomorrow live from 9 to 12:30 Pacific. Not too late to register. We would love to see you there. We've got more than 1,500 people planning to attend, and you could be one of them if you're not already. So visit our website, sheltersummit.com, and we have a really great lineup of topics. We're going to talk about managing admissions with compassion and good communication. We're going to talk about how to stay within your capacity for care. We're going to talk about how to use your shelter software and data to improve operations. We're going to talk about barrier busting to get animals home or to their new homes. And we're going to talk about easier ways to make difficult decisions. And all of this is meant to help you manage your population and also feel better about your work and preserve yourself so that you can keep doing the great work you're doing. And the special thing about the summit is it's a half-hour overview of each topic. And then after that, we have these fast tracks that you can join to work with the coaches. 2 of them are in this room right now, at least, because I see Nadia and Allison in here. And it's going to be an 8-week series of live meetings, 4 of them over 8 weeks, and 4 weeks with office hours. And so this way you can learn about the topic and then actually start to implement it with a lot of coaching and support. So we would love to see you there. There is CE available for this, race, NACA, and CAWA. And then also we will have this on demand after the fact. So if you don't show up live, you'll still get the links to see it on demand after the event. So please join us. We think it's going to be a lot of fun. We've got some amazing speakers and coaches. And remember, everyone is welcome. This is for everybody from leadership, management, frontline. Get them over here, tell them about it, sheltersummit.com, and we would love to see you all. Thank you.
Hey y'all, it's Kathy from Canada. So I feel like maybe Maddie's stole our summit name, but that's okay. We love you anyway. So just a reminder that Humane Canada's Summit for Animals, which is in person, is coming up May 2nd to 4th, 2023 in lovely Victoria, British Columbia. So hoping to see some of you there. I don't think it's that far from all of you. So, and it will be less expensive for you folks from the US because, you know, our dollar's not worth as much as yours right now.
Hello, this is Vincent, the Maddie's project director for the Human Animal Support Services Project, and just wanted to remind everybody that we have a webinar that I am co-hosting with the fabulous Lindsay Hamrick from the Humane Society of the United States. It is called Positively Thriving: Strategies for Work-Life Balance and Animal Welfare. So we're continuing to keep the H and Haas as human, and want to hopefully see all of you there.
All right, we'll give one more moment. If anyone else has any national updates they want to share, you can always drop them in the chat throughout as well. All right, cool. I'll kick it to you, Irene, to introduce our speaker.
All right, very excited to introduce our headliner today. It is Nadia Oseguera from the UC Davis Koret Shelter Medicine Program. She is their California Program Manager. Give it up for Nadia, everybody.
Thanks, Irene. I'm going to share my screen and just let me know when you can see my screen on presentation mode. 1 second. Okay, so you see my cover, right? Is that okay? Cool. All righty, thank you so much for having me, Maddie's Fund. I'm excited to share about the work that I've done, in particular an incremental change approach to building bridges to inclusive foster programming. Before I get started, I want to tell you a little bit about my lived experience. In particular, I want to share 3 instances or experiences that I had with community cats that really stand out in my mind. The first, I grew up in Panorama City in the Valley here in Los Angeles, and there were always community cats in my neighborhood. There was one in particular that always came to our yard to give birth, and we simply coexisted. I never took the kittens from her. She didn't bother me. We were just co-living. But it wasn't until 2008, when I was already an adult, that my partner had come over and he noticed that 2 of the kittens that we named Jack and Brittany looked a little sick and frail. So we decided to scoop them up and take them to our local shelter. We didn't really know anything about TNR at the time, or if they would go into foster care or not. We just thought that was the best thing to do in that situation. Fast forward to 2014, and we were living in Rialto, which is in San Bernardino County. And so a cat showed up into our yard, and I scooped her up because she was friendly, and I brought her into my home. I didn't know that she was pregnant, and she went into labor about 2 weeks later. And unfortunately, she delivered 2 stillbirths, and we had to rush her more than 40 miles to an emergency clinic so that she could deliver Molly, who is pictured here, and she's now my 15-pound cat. When it was time to finally get them spayed, we had to once again take a long trip. We traveled more than 50 miles to be able to get them both altered at a cost that we could afford. Lastly, about 2 years before I started working animal welfare professionally, we were living in Baldwin Park, and we went to a local pizza spot where we saw a group of cats in the parking lot. We later found out that they actually were also living in the mayor of Baldwin Park's backyard. So through a lot of community building, we talked to the business owners, talked to the people in the neighborhood, the mayor of Baldwin Park. My partner was very, very dedicated, and we were able to get them all TNR'd. We don't maintain this colony or group of cats ourselves, but I could tell you that they are still being very well taken care of by the local business owners and the local community. So I shared these 3 situations because they happened to me, but these are all too common. So they happen all the time in high intake areas where there are not enough spay-neuter resources. All of these cities, in fact, would be considered high intake areas. And that's where I've lived my entire life. It's all I've ever known. And also I wanted to share the years to point out that not much has changed since when these situations happen. There's still not that many spay-neuter resources available in the community. And so when we think about high intake areas and we think about barriers, typically the barriers that are put up through our operations or our processes are impacting people who live in these communities. And instead of blaming them, whether it's intentionally or not intentionally, I'm encouraging you that you remove any barriers and that you make the joys of animal welfare more accessible to these communities. So what I mean by the joys of animal welfare, I'm talking about fostering adorable kittens, adopting a dog from your shelter, or being reunited with their pet who's gone missing. I'll tell you a little bit about my work so that you can get a sense of where all of this happened, what I'm about to share with you. So I worked for the ASPCA for 5 years. I managed a high volume kitten and cat foster program. This was in partnership with the LA County Department of Animal Care and Control, but we were our own entity. There was also an adoption component to this program, but I'm just going to focus on the foster side of things. So during my 5 years with the ASPCA, we were able to support more than 9,000 felines from various care centers. And we were really only able to do this because we recruited a ton of fosters. So during my time there, we recruited more than 1,000 foster caregivers. And I attribute this again to what I shared in the previous slide, that I've lived in areas where usually people are excluded from animal welfare. So for me, my approach was anybody who wants to foster should be able to. Once I took over foster recruitment, I really wanted to create a racially diverse foster base. I wanted our fosters to be representative of the communities where the kittens were coming from, and also to ensure that it was economically accessible to everyone. And I will note that even in its pilot phase, this program was relatively barrier-free, but as it started to grow, there were definitely moments there where there were urges to put up barriers so that we can make our lives easier. But I really took the approach of making it easier for others and not just having it be a convenience for me and my team. So in the spirit of the Open Arms Challenge, I want to briefly touch on how removing barriers from your foster program ties into welcoming practices. So first, you can increase inclusivity through your recruitment tactics, maybe making your program more accessible to everyone, or how you approach continued training. So being mindful that people absorb information differently, or they have different learning styles. You can also provide a welcoming environment in your sign-up and onboarding process. And today I'll talk about the sign-up process as an example of what it looks like. And in the end, you will be keeping people and pets together by soliciting help from your community and, more importantly, accepting help from everybody in your community. When you are starting to dismantle barriers from your operations, I sort of coined this term for myself of scanning your operations or assessing your operations for barriers. What I will focus on today is this concept of asking specific questions. I am very big on introspection, and one of the ways that you can do that is by asking questions that elicit action. You could also seek feedback from your colleagues, whether it's people that you work with in your organization or other industry colleagues. You can also seek feedback from your fosters or your volunteers. And I think that's really important because they are the ones that are experiencing your program from the outside in. They're the ones that can tell you how welcoming it was when they applied to be a foster, or how accessible it's been given their own circumstances. I also encourage you to collaborate with your team. So once you start breaking down barriers or implementing welcoming practices, it's going to be very important to continue collaborating with people outside of your foster program. One, they can give you objective feedback, but also you need buy-in from everybody in your organization in order to not put up more barriers, because what ends up happening is if something goes wrong, say, during a medical exam, and people want to put up more barriers or blame your fosters because something went wrong, really, try to bring everybody along for the ride of being more inclusive and avoid replacing any of the barriers that you remove with new ones. So breaking down barriers or welcoming practices or open adoptions, these are all terms that can lead to great movements within animal welfare. However, they are also pretty broad, and it can be very overwhelming. Even if you watch a webinar or this presentation, it might be difficult to digest it and figure out where to even get started. So an incremental change approach has worked for me. Those 9,000 kittens that we supported during my 5 years at the ASPCA, that didn't happen overnight. That happened through incremental changes. So when you take this approach, you can acknowledge that not everything is going to happen at once, and just decide what your starting point is. You can decide that based on your organization's realities. So your budget, your staff, your community, where you're at currently. And that allows you to create a pathway that makes sense for you and your organization. You'll also be able to acknowledge the small wins that will come along the way. When we're in it and it's very busy, it's hard to stop and smell the roses. So by taking these smaller steps, you can acknowledge like, oh, this great thing happened. And that is a form of positive reinforcement in itself because it's showing you that what you're doing is working. It's also easier to adjust behaviors when you're not trying to overhaul your entire, foster program or adoptions program. It'll be easier for your team to get adjusted to the new way of doing things. And there will be some challenges that will come up because the world is not perfect. So it'll be easier for you to address those challenges and to see them for just that, a challenge that came up so you can address it and then move on. The other great thing is that you'll be able to identify lessons that you're learning along the way that you can apply to other changes that you want to make. Because a lot of the times when we're thinking about being more inclusive, the guiding principles will be the same. So as you're moving on to the next change that you want to make, you'll be able to apply what you've already learned from the previous changes. And anytime that you're piloting anything or trying a new project, it's really important to capture data. But when you are doing all of these changes at once, you might not know exactly what it is that you're trying to measure. So by focusing on smaller changes, maybe you'll be able to more clearly identify what data you want to track and when you want to measure the progress. And beyond breaking things down into smaller steps, I also encourage you to focus on specific areas. So when we think of a foster program, it's also this very big machine that has a lot of smaller pieces. And so here I'm going to just quickly describe the 5 areas of focus. So first is foster recruitment. You can think of this as your way of asking people for help or doing outreach and telling them that there's a ton of kittens that need foster homes. Foster program accessibility, this is how easy it is for people to engage with your program. And the goal is to make it as easy as possible for people. The foster sign-up form, you can think of this as the way that people raise their hand and say, hey, I want to help your organization. The onboarding process is the information that people need to learn or know about before they actually bring an animal home. And foster development and retention, this is my personal favorite because this is for the long haul. So you hopefully want people to stick with you for years to come. And so how you develop them really depends on what people want to learn, what populations you want to support. And then retention is all about relationship building. So getting to know your fosters, showing genuine interest in wanting them to continue to help you. And I guarantee you that they will also be very grateful that you are allowing them to help your organization. When you're starting to make changes, again, it can be a little bit difficult to determine where to get started or where to go. And something that has been very helpful for me is to have guiding questions that can lead to action. If I were to ask everybody these 5 questions, you would probably say yes. Your answer might be yes. And the reason I can say that with confidence is because I talk to shelters and foster-based organizations almost every day in my current role. And a lot of the times people will say, yes, our recruitment tactics are inclusive, our application is welcoming. And then I will actually see or hear more of what they're doing. And I'm taken aback because there's so much opportunity to make it even more welcoming or inclusive. And it's not to blame people for that, but it's because when you're in it every single day and you're asking these broad questions, it can be difficult to really figure out where to go next. So some examples of specific questions, if you want to assess your recruitment tactics, you might ask, which community members are we leaving out with our current recruitment tactics? A couple potential actions from here could be looking at the zip codes where your fosters are coming from, looking at where most of your animals are coming from, and then seeing if there's a gap there. So is that matching? Are you recruiting from all of the areas in your service area. You can also look at your foster demographics and compare that against the demographics within your community. If you want to assess how accessible your program is, you might ask, how can we make fostering accessible to anyone who wants to help? And the word anyone is very important here because, again, anybody who raises their hand and says that they want to help should be able to, and it should be as easy as possible for people to help your organization. What information do we need to know about applicants? So this can help you assess your sign-up form or your application, and I'll actually break this down in the next slide. And then to look at your onboarding process, you can ask, what steps do people need to take to onboard with our program? And the word need is very important. So a lot of the times what we see in onboarding processes is that we want fosters to know every single thing there is to know about cats or dogs. But the reality is that people are not going to retain 100% of the information that you share with them. So instead, I encourage you to be more flexible and to really determine what is the absolute information that they need to know so that we can set them up for success. And the rest will come. They're going to learn by doing. They're going to learn with any continued trainings that you provide for them. And that goes on with my last point here. So what tools or resources can we provide to support foster development and promote retention? And that's where you can really start to figure out what people want to learn, what populations they want to foster, which animals you have in your organization that need fostering, and then tailor that. And then as far as promoting retention, there's a ton of things that you can do, whether it's foster engagement or just plain old relationship building. So let's look at this example of what it might look like to assess your foster sign-up form. So the guiding question here is, what information do we need to know about applicants? Some potential incremental changes that you can make is to start with your sign-up form and reviewing every single question on there. And I really mean going one question at a time and making a note next to it that explicitly says what you intend to do with that information. Then the goal will be to keep your application as concise as possible. So start removing questions that don't need to be there and ask only what you need to know. So I'll give you an example. At the ASPCA, we did ask for people's addresses. And the reason for that was because we did offer a ride share option, and we also offered the option to have supplies delivered to people's homes. So that was the purpose of us collecting the address. It wasn't so that we can pop in or do a home visit or look up their address on Google Maps to see what it looks like. It was really with good intention. And I challenge you to try to remove any questions that are aimed at denying people from helping your organization. A lot of the times when I see applications, I'll see questions, and I will know that that question is meant to set up people in some way to try to catch bad fosters or people who won't be good at fostering. But the reality is that even if you do ask those questions, you might not know how things are going to turn out in the future anyway. And if you remove those questions, you are protecting yourself against being biased. So sometimes these questions that are aimed at denying people will bias you against certain people. And so you might deny their application, or you might decide to not send them any animals. But if you don't have those questions, then you're not going to have that information. So you won't be biased against certain people. And I guarantee you that something good is going to come out of that. You're going to see that people are actually really great, and that it feels amazing when you have thousands of people helping your organization. Instead of asking irrelevant questions, I encourage you to ask questions that are aimed at learning about people's self-reported preferences. So this could be how many animals they can foster, how long they can foster for, maybe what skills they have or what skills they want to learn. And beyond that, so it is easier for us to have an application that lives online or a physical application. But if people can't fill out the standard form of application that you have, be flexible. Take the information by phone call or by email, or have them come into your organization to fill it out, because you might be missing out on a great foster. And that happened to us where our application was online and people would email us and say, I'm having trouble filling it out. So we would take the information by phone or by email, and they turned out to be great fosters. So you don't want to miss out on a potentially amazing foster. Now, I also understand that with certain municipalities, there is information that is required for you to ask and that you will not be able to remove from your application. So adding a small blurb explaining why you need that information can be welcoming in itself, and also asking the question in an inviting manner. So rather than saying you are required to provide XYZ, you can frame it as, please tell us more about XYZ. I mentioned that you will have a lot of wins along the way, but there might also be one-off adverse situations, and it's important to measure your progress so that you don't let that one-off situation overshadow your wins. So this could be tracking things like where people are hearing about your program or how they're hearing about it, so that you can learn what recruitment tactics are working, learning more about people's preferred language of communication. So even if you don't have translated materials, just by asking that question and telling people that you hope to translate materials in the future can be inviting. Also learning what people's preferred communication method is. So an example here is our foster base really preferred text messaging. And we used to email them all the time, and there were some fosters that were not responsive. And in our mind, that came off as they're not being responsive, they're irresponsible, but it really turned out that their preferred communication method was texting. And when we switched to texting a majority of our fosters, we did get a very good response rate. Also asking whether transportation assistance is needed can be helpful. Like I said, we offered a rideshare service for our fosters. And if your organization is not able to do that, but you're learning that most people do need transportation, that could be something that you address the following budgeting season to see if it's something that your organization can provide. And also learning where your foster caregivers live. So I put zip codes here in parentheses. Sometimes that is used against people, but here I am proposing that you use it so that you learn where are your fosters coming from and what areas are fosters not coming from, or where recruitment tactics are not happening, so that you can focus in on engaging those communities. And I said that you don't need to overload people with information during the onboarding process, but be curious about what your fosters want to learn, what continued trainings they want to take on. And once you do start offering continued trainings, track what trainings people are actually attending and see if that correlates with the populations of animals that you are supporting. So I can tell you from my experience that that was the case. We surveyed people 1 year, and a majority of people said they wanted to learn how to bottle feed. So I made a virtual bottle feeding class, and that year we were able to help hundreds of bottle babies, and they just became a standard in our program after that. And we did see that reflected in the populations of animals that we were able to help. And I mentioned earlier too that seeking feedback from your fosters can be very helpful insight, but keep track of that feedback. So don't just collect it and do something with it and then toss it away. I encourage you to keep that feedback so that you can compare year over year to see how your program is doing and how people are experiencing your program. So I want to close with a few reflections. First, I think it's really important for me to acknowledge that this was not a municipality. So we did work in partnership with LA County Department of Animal Care and Control, but because we were not bound to that organization, we did have a lot of flexibility, and any ordinances that did apply to DACC did not apply to us. And I say this because I recognize that sometimes it can be a little bit harder to make changes when there are ordinances in place, or maybe a board of supervisors that you have to run things up the ladder to. We also were a very tech-heavy program. That was by design, because if I can get technology to do things for me, I'm going to do that. And it really helped streamline our operations. You know, we were a high volume program where at any given moment during kitten season, we would have about 300 to 350 kittens or cats in foster care. So technology was very beneficial to us. And I recognize that that might have been a barrier to some people, but whenever that did come up, so when people shared that they couldn't fill out a web form or they needed help booking an appointment, we really made every effort to be flexible with them. Also, although we were a relatively barrier-free foster program, I want to acknowledge that the majority of our foster base were white women in affluent areas. And so by the time I took over foster recruitment, we did already have a robust foster base. And it wasn't about getting rid of those fosters, but I really did attempt to make any new recruitment efforts to be focused in on areas where the kittens were coming from. And so even if you do already have an established foster base that it's not very diverse, I can tell you that it is possible to diversify. You just have to change the approach that you're taking. Lastly, it is very important to spread the DEI lens. So I operate, because of my lived experience that I shared earlier, everything that I do it through a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I manage the foster program that way, and I manage my team that way. And when that approach is not spread across teams, then there might be some gaps in alignment. So really make sure that everybody in your organization is on board with that, because ultimately when you are removing barriers, you are diversifying your foster base. You are keeping in mind that racial equity is a priority and you're being more inclusive. With that, I will open it up to questions. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Nadia. That was incredible. I learned so much. We've got a few questions for you in the chat that I'll follow up with. So this first one from Angela, she asked, how do we add a foster element when we don't have enough staff available? She's very interested in expanding her foster program, but bandwidth doesn't match need. Are there any models for foster management with a small staff?
Yeah, so we were a team of 3 people. When I first started with the ASPCA, I was a team of 1. And so we started very small. And maybe not the best term, but we started with the low-hanging fruit. So the kittens that were easier to manage. So whatever populations you want to focus in on, and if you're just a team of 1 person, I encourage you to start small, because even with, you know, helping 50 animals, that's still 50 animals that you're able to help. And what you can also do as your foster base is growing is train them to be mentors, so that you can have some volunteers helping you to manage your foster program.
Thank you. That's such a great suggestion. I mean, I'm a kitten foster volunteer as well. And as much as I can help out, I just need to be asked. Like, that's some of the things sometimes. It's just, if you don't ask, you're not going to necessarily get that help you need. So I think it's super important to reach out to your fosters in that way. And then another question from Julie Lonnie is, do you have a template for a barrier-free sign-up form?
Actually, we are, Allison Cardona and I, we're doing the barrier busting fast track through the UC Davis Shelter Summit. And we will be sharing all of this there. There is a link, I don't have it in front of me, to sign up for the fast track. So just to give you a sense of that, we'll start with helping you assess any barriers that might exist in your operations, whether it's barriers to fostering, adopting, return to home. And then we will actually be asking you to bring in your materials. If you don't have any, we will show you examples of what you can do. So if you have the capacity, join us and we'll share that with you.
Awesome, thank you. I dropped the link in the chat for that as well. So if you want to sign up for those Zoom calls, you can. And then another question you may be able to help us with, where'd it go? Are there programs to fund transportation for those who want to foster but need that assistance?
Yeah, so I can tell you the way that we did it, it was budgeted into our annual budget. And the reason for that is because we were a remote foster program. So although some of us did spend a lot of time at the care centers, our foster base was spread across Los Angeles County, even into Orange County and the surrounding cities. So if you don't currently have a budget for that, I encourage you to try to figure out what are the needs in your community for transportation assistance, and then try to create a budget around that. The other things that I've seen happen is having a donation or a fundraiser so that you can get the funds that you need for transportation. And you can also limit it to people who express needing it. So we were very flexible with offering the ride share service, but we also were upfront in saying like there's not, an infinite amount of funding. So if you really need the service, then we will offer it to you. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And again, asking, right? Someone shared in the chat, we have a good volunteer base and some people sign up just to be transporters, right? So again, just listen to what the community needs and who's out there that can really provide some help for you. I don't see any other questions right now. If anyone has anything they'd like to ask Nadia, feel free to unmute and ask her.
Yeah, Nadia, as far as the fostering, there's within foster programs, there's categories of work, right? A lot of everybody thinks about handling the cats and feeding the cats and stuff like that, but you may have retirees that have a technical background that could do some process for you and to create your websites or create the forms that you need, marketers that help do the specific outreach that you're doing to categories of market. So, often when I hear people talking about fostering, it's walking the dog or, handling the cat. But as you know, there's categories of volunteering that we have an auxiliary, for example, that has 60 people that 3/4 of them don't go to the shelter very often, but they raise $150,000 every year for the program by doing the administrative work or the marketing work and that kind of thing. So it's important to have that as a consideration for, a foster category or a subcategory within your program. Do you have anything like that within yours?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. And I don't know if I touched on this, but through our retention efforts, we really got to know our fosters well. And so we started to see who our artsy fosters were so that they could help us make things for cats, and also who our tech savvy fosters were. So we did have somebody in particular who did have a background in web development. Fortunately, at the ASPCA, we did have a whole web team, but she was able to help us with some of our creative designs. So that is something else. And it doesn't even have to be, excuse me, it doesn't have to be through your foster base directly. It could just be putting out a call to your community, reaching out to local community colleges or universities or even high schools where students are interested in developing those skills or already possess those skills. And I'll say the same thing too, just while I'm talking about translation services, because that is something that comes up a lot. And some of the places where you could seek translation services are the same. So within your volunteers, it could be local community centers, universities, colleges, high schools, and not just the students, but also the teachers, because we did have a lot of fosters who were also in education. And we knew that during kitten season or spring break or winter break, they had a lot of free time. So if you are interested in seeking translation services, that might be an opportunity to seek out within your community.
And I'll also share a post on the forum that we wrote about for the last Open Arms Challenge, and it was all focused on translation services. So we've got some different information of our other challengers that went through the process. Some of them went through the schools like Nadia suggested, and also just putting things into Google Translate and then having someone else who spoke that language able to translate from there. So there's definitely some opportunities out there. All right, we'll open it up for any last minute questions, thoughts, or anything you want to share with our speaker, Nadia, today. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I'll just drive the point home that just pick a place where you want to start and make it happen. And if you do need support, Allison and I will be available for the next 8 weeks via the Shelter Summit Fast Tracks. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. We'll wrap it up. I'll drop the link in the chat as well. Don't forget to enter to win for our grant giveaway for this month. And then next week, we're continuing our theme of welcoming practices. And so next week, we'll have a presentation from Jasmine O'Keefe from League City Animal Care. And she'll presenting on leading staff and volunteers through operational changes to embrace barrier-free practices. It's a mouthful, but we've got a lot to work on. So feel free to add any final questions, comments there, and we hope to see you all next week.